Okay, well, welcome to our Free Society podcast here at Hannibal LaGrange University. Our Free Society program is built upon three pillars: free market economics, limited government, and cultural institutions like the church. And so today we are excited to welcome Chloe Cole with us, who is a national youth advocate, speaks out on gender transition. She's a detransitioner. And so we're here to have a conversation with her today. So Chloe, welcome. We are glad that you're here.
Thank you guys for having me. I've been touring around the campus today. I've met some of the students. I got to speak in the chapel to some of them earlier this morning, and I've had a great time. This is shaping up, honestly, to be one of the best campuses I've visited.
Thank you.
You guys are great.
We love that. We love to hear that. That's good news. So we like to we often say we're one of the best kept secrets, but we would like to not be that. So you help with that and with your national exposure for us and all of that. So we like to start our podcast with kind of a fun question. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this is not related to anything sort of the topic that we're going to want to talk about, but here's the question I want to ask you. If your life right now had a theme song, what would that song be?
Oh, man. What would the theme song be?
What would the theme song of your
music
life?
So much. I listen to so many different genres, but every time somebody asks me a question about music, I immediately go blank. I don't know what my theme song would be. I'll have to look in one of my playlists to answer that. I've been listening to a bunch of...
what have you been listening to lately?
I've been listening to a lot of 80s rock and pop, actually.
Yeah, there you go. That's generation right there.
I don't...
Now you're speaking our language.
That's a winner.
There's one... There's a Rod Stewart song, I think, actually.
Oh.
I used to... My dad used to play it a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it's I almost got it. I think it's Young Turks.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe not the exact themes or story in the song, but it evokes that feeling of young freedom and almost rebellion.
Sure.
That that the past 4 years of my life have been focused on.
Yeah, in many ways, that relates to what you've been doing. You've been kind of rebelling against sort of the cultural tide that is out there. And so that's a great transition. I didn't think that the first question was going to help us to bridge the gap. I thought it was just going to have some fun, break the ice, so to speak. But just tell us, kind of looking back a little bit about your story. Tell us about what were the key influences culturally, medically, relationally that shaped your decisions, your decision at the time to transition from female to male and then back again.
So growing up, my mom and dad, though they were raised Christian, I wasn't really raised in the church myself. We went to church together as a family until I was about 5 years old, going into kindergarten. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of recollection of what that was like, or nor did I have those biblical values or teachings being part of most of the 2 decades of my life so far. And I feel like that was in large part what led to my crisis in identity surfacing so young. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why God made me in the shape and form I was, why I was a female, why I couldn't fit in with other girls, or really a lot of kids my age. And I just felt this sense of isolation and strangeness, I guess, around myself. And I tried to look for that. I tried to answer that question of who I was in so many different ways. And I think the most dangerous, the most destructive one being in transgenderism and having that ideology inform most of my adolescent years. And I didn't initially believe myself to be a boy until I was around 12 or 13. And I got my first cell phone. I already was being exposed to a lot of bad influences, both at school, of friends whose parents just never really monitored what video games they're playing or what kind of movies they're watching or what they were seeing on social media. And a commonality amongst me and almost everybody I grew up with was that we got exposed to pornography really young.
Right.
And I mean, these websites to this day, most states don't have a law that mandates ID or actual age verification. So you can just be a kid randomly popping up on these websites one day, or you might have somebody from school telling you about it. And all you get is like a pop-up at first asking whether you're above the age of 18 or not, and you just click yes and no to get into the website, and that's all it takes. And from that, I think my first exposure to it was when I must have been about like 7 to 8 years old.
It's way too young.
Far too young. And even before I got exposed to it, I was learning these awful ideas about male versus female and the design of human sexuality and what love actually means. And it just... when that kind of thing already twists your mind, but when you're very young, when you're like a pre-sexual being and you're prepubescent and you're already seeing these like very twisted images of what love is actually supposed to look like and what the human body is actually supposed to look like, and this idea of what you're supposed to look like or be, what kind of role you're supposed to fill as a girl, that's very confusing.
Yes.
And there also was the politically radicalizing content that I was seeing when from very early on in having my phone, actually. I went straight to using social media because I had a lot of friends who already had phones in like kindergarten and first grade, like iPhones, smartphones, and their parents were already making like social media for them. They just allowed them to use like whatever they wanted to, whenever. And I remember for so long I was begging my mom and dad to let me have my own devices, to let me have my own phone and like have Instagram accounts, just like my friends were, right? Because when you're a kid, and especially as you're going into like the teen stages of your life, you want to fit in, you want to be able to connect with other people. You don't want to be the odd one out.
Yeah.
And when I finally got my first phone, I made accounts on different websites. Like Instagram was the big one.
Right.
And I first started by following people from school. And then eventually through like the explore page, I was discovering just like different memes, some less appropriate than others, like different posts. And then eventually I discovered the transgender community through these posts and these accounts that were kind of centered more around just like normal adolescent interests. So like TV shows, cartoons.
Was that like through Reddit
music.
Or like?
It was mostly through Instagram.
Instagram?
Primarily through Instagram, yes. But it was the artwork and the media that drew me in, and also just these other kids talking about their lives and talking about things that I could relate to, like pretty much like almost one-on-one. I wasn't even directly interacting with them for the most part, but I felt seen. Growing up as a kid, I didn't really feel like I fit into a box. I was a little bit more of a tomboy, but I had a hard time getting along with other kids and feeling like I could relate to them. And that was the first time really in my life that I felt like I was like somebody my own age. And it went from personal relation to these people to deep questioning about why I felt that way, where are these feelings deep inside, why I related to them, and what that meant for me. And it started very personal. It turned into a little bit more of like an intellectual thing, because it turned out there were dozens of studies around this that seemed to support this idea that these people were actually born in the wrong body, and that's where their feelings of incongruence with their body, with their sex, with themselves really came from it. That there was hope for them, but there was a cure for them, and it was so interesting to me. And eventually, I thought, well, these are people who I share a lot in common with, almost like down to a T. And maybe the reason for that is because I'm not just an outsider. I'm one of them. I'm transgender. I was never a tomboy. This discomfort around growing into my body, it's all because on some level I'm actually a young man, and this is the path I have to go down. I was about 12 when I started to refer to myself as a young man.
When that was taking place at that point, you're 12 years old. And you have all the changes going on. The Christians that were around you, let me ask you this. I'm kind of curious about this because what you're going through and what you went through in California knows no state limit. Everything that you had access to and that you're going through can happen in every state, right?
You can access anywhere. And I'll tell you, having been to so many, over the past 4 years, I've been speaking out about this issue on in different ways. I've been testifying on legislation to protect kids or against legislation that would allow this abuse to continue in the hospital systems. I've been speaking to churches, communities, as well as conferences and schools like this. And everywhere I've gone, I've met somebody who is struggling with this in some capacity, whether they're the ones who are going through the confusion themselves, or they're coming out of it, they're detransitioning, or they're a parent or a friend who has had to deal with this.
Yeah, even with states like I know Missouri is an age verification state now. For like you said, you used to be able to click like, yes, I'm over 18, but now you have to verify by ID. And so a lot of these websites have chosen not to operate, like in Missouri. I think Florida is another one I've read about recently. So, but that still doesn't stop like the peer group aspect that you're talking about, right? Like the people you were talking to online, like on social media, on Instagram. And so, Mr. Harry, you had the question about the Christian influence.
Well, I was kind of interested in, at that point, you're 12 years old. You're not really surrounded by devout Christians, right? Would that be a fair assessment? And so how are the Christians treating you at that point?
So I didn't really have a whole lot of Christian influences in my life. Pretty much all of my friends, both online and at school, and people within my family were atheist or agnostic, or they were Christian, but they didn't necessarily like live out their values openly. I would say that the biggest Christian influence in my life was one of my older brothers, actually, but he had enlisted into the Navy and he was gone for a few years. And that's actually a big part of what led to my identity confusion and my depression going into my middle school years. Like, one of the people I could relate to the most was now gone. He was off into the adult world. And I greatly missed him and the guidance that he had for me and the fun that we would have together. And so we went a few years, I would say about a year to 2 years, without really directly communicating with each other, because when he first went into the Navy, I don't think I had a phone at all. And I would only hear of him through phone calls sometimes, because he was in boot camp for a little bit and he wouldn't really have any. At the time, they were a lot more strict on
not
allowing access to internet and phones. And something that's really upsetting to look back on, actually, is the fact that he didn't know until I was already into the medical side of things.
Yeah.
And there was one day after my 8th grade year, it was the summertime. I was on vacation with my mom and dad, and he called my mom. And he heard my voice in the background. It was all deep, and it didn't sound the way that it used to. And so he was shocked. He was like, "Mom, what's wrong with her voice? Is she sick? What's the matter with her?" And she explained the whole situation to him, that I was on hormones, that I was transitioning, that I wanted to be called by a new name. And there was this period of silence that was so loud until he finally said, "Mom, you know that she's going to regret that, right? She can't be doing this as a kid." He made himself very clear in that moment.
Wow. And
good on him for doing so. He could have gone even deeper into it, honestly.
Sure.
But I remember being like, "Oh my God, what an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what I'm going through." Like, after all, you know who said yes to this? It was my doctors. These are people with degrees. They spend like their whole lives studying this kind of thing.
Yeah, don't they know better, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that he was actually trying to protect me, and that he actually had transgender friends who told him, like, "This is not for kids. This is something that should strictly be for adults, and I don't think this is a good idea at all for your sister to be going through this, and you should try and stop her from doing it." He really was looking out for me, but for a while I just thought that he either hated me or he was just dumb, and he didn't know. I didn't have a single clue about what he was trying to do. And it put a big strain on our relationship. But I do think that he was one of the people who put that seed of doubt that I really desperately needed into my mind when many people were afraid to stick up for me. Yeah. And I've had a lot of people in my life later tell me, "I wish I spoke up to you sooner, because I knew that it was wrong, but I didn't know how to. I didn't want to ruin my relationship with you or with your mom and dad."
Yeah.
But
how do people do that then? Like, for someone, from your perspective, like growing up with this, how does someone speak with conviction and compassion into someone who's struggling?
Well, I'll tell you how not to do it, because I also had Christian friends at school, who I don't think they were really convicted in their faith or in Christ-like love for me. They just saw it as, oh, she's different. Well, it's time to make fun of her and tell her how much of an abomination she is, and tell her that God only has this plan and that plan, otherwise I'm going to go to hell.
So it's more like judgment-driven.
Yes, very, very judgment-driven.
Yeah.
Very, very selfish, and it made me feel like a freak, and if anything, that actually pushed me further into it, because I already felt that way. I already felt like I was unappreciated, like I didn't have an identity, and I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them one day I'm going to look, sound, and be treated as a young man, and they are going to take me seriously for the person who I truly believe I am. And so it drove me away from the faith for a while.
Were you presenting yourself on social media as a man then?
I was, and it's actually social media where I first started. That was kind of like my test grounds, talking to all my online friends and asking them to call me this and that, and announcing when I got like my first shots for puberty blockers and testosterone, and kind of detailing my experience a little bit. And that was because I didn't have I was not like a very social kid. I was super awkward. I could barely look people in the eye. And I wanted to open up to the world, but I wanted to do it in a place where I felt more comfortable first. And unfortunately, it didn't start with my family or with my friends. It was in this world where I thought I lived in more of a bubble. I thought I lived in more of a private vacuum, but I was just kind of like giving it out to these people who didn't necessarily have my best interest in mind and would push me further into it.
So social media tells a lot of times, you can look at somebody's social media feed and you can see their journey, right? From here's where they were, 10 years ago to here's where they are now. So I'm curious, did you go back and scrub your social media, or did you leave up some of your journey there so that people could see the difference of where you were and where you are now?
I did delete or abandon a lot of my accounts, and I don't really have access to them anymore. I did save some stuff that I want to keep for documentation purposes, to remember how difficult things were then, to serve as a reminder.
Yeah, that's good. Mr. Aaron?
If you could go back and you could talk to the doctor and the therapist, and you could pull them aside and say anything to them from the time when you were 12 years old to now, if you could talk to them now, what would you say?
That's a great question.
If I were the person who I am now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just say you could go back, you'd be in the same room with them when they're talking to your parents and they're talking to you. What would you say to them?
Well, they actually had separate conversations with my parents that I was not a part of. And one of the things that they told Mom and Dad was that, they started going into the suicide statistics, which I actually didn't know about, I don't think, until I detransitioned. And it's pretty much their entire basis for experimenting medically on children in the first place. They call it a suicide reduction practice. They literally call it life-saving care, because they're trained to see this as a life and death issue, to see puberty as something that induces suicide in these so-called transgender child patients. And the best practice is to stop pubertal development pretty much entirely and to try and stimulate the development of the opposite sex. And they told my mom and dad whenever they had any concerns, any questions, or if they pushed back just in any sensible way. My mom and dad were asking questions like, so what are the odds that she's going to regret this? And is this something that might harm her body in the long term? Is she going to be able to have kids if we start her on this? She's only a year into having periods. Not even, honestly. It only had 3 or 4 periods by that point in time. And they already were thinking about putting me on these procedures that would basically entirely stop any further developments. But they had all the right questions, and they were immediately shot down. And they were told every time, at pretty much every step of the way, you're going to have to choose between having a daughter who takes her own life because she wasn't allowed to be who she truly is, or you're going to have a living, happy transgender son. The choice is yours.
Did they make that up out of out of their own beliefs? Or was there anything objectively true there? Were you looking back? Were you suicidal? Had you made those studies? If you don't let me transition to being a boy, then this is going to happen? Or did they just pull that out of thin air a little bit as part of their evidence of, you have to listen to us as the experts?
So it was based on these very shoddy studies that, first of all, focus only on adults. And fast forward a few years, 2024, during the Scrimeti versus U.S. case regarding the constitutionality of these laws that protect children from transgender procedures, there was actually a lawyer who was arguing in favor of throwing out protection laws, who admitted that the rates of completed suicide and even suicidality are actually exceedingly rare in the child transgender population. So it just completely toppled down whatever argument they had for doing this to kids in the first place. Really, their biggest arguments for doing it. But it's all really just a matter of ideology. There is no sound science behind this. And if I were there in that room, I would tell these adults who were manipulating my parents, who were coercing them into doing things that went against the very judgment that God gave them over my life and safety, I'm not suicidal. In fact, I wasn't suicidal until I began treatment about a year in.
Interesting.
And the further that I went in, the more I disassociated from myself, because I was living with this weight of lying not just to myself, but to the entire world around me. I was using like boys' restrooms, which thank God I'm not using those ever again.
Amen.
Especially in a high school of all places. There are some things that you see in there that are like,
right.
I wish I did not have eyes.
We understand.
Close my eyes.
But I thought that, man, I just lost my track of thought. I was thinking about how, like, I went through some really strange stuff during that time. And I was just in this constantly unnatural role trying to adapt to like being a man, the expectations that would be placed upon me. And I learned that the grass is not in fact greener on the other side, that I was born to be one way and men can handle all the other things that I wasn't supposed to. And even if I were somehow actually a young man, it's not easy. I saw a lot of the social difficulties that men of all ages, I think, go through, from both being closer to the men around me and getting to see the things they went through up close and personal, and also like living in that role myself. And I have a lot more empathy, a lot more appreciation for the men in my life because of what I've seen that most women don't get to. And I think that in general, as a culture, we need to be more appreciative of each other. It's brought me a lot more appreciation for my own role as well as that of the opposite sex. But if I were to speak to the doctors myself, even outside of that conversation they had where they really lied to my mom and dad, and they used really terrible evidence to try and push all of us into this, I had the displeasure of talking to my surgeon a year after it happened about my regret, about the fact that I didn't know what I was signing up for as a kid. And I asked him, I was a 15-year-old. I saw the look of shock on one of the faces of the nurses who was working with you before I went in. Explain yourself. How could you do this to a 15-year-old? With how young, how innocent I was. And he said, his response was this immediate cold, well, I thought it was okay because somebody else signed off on it.
Oh.
He said, well, you had the letter of recommendation and you had a therapist beforehand who said it was okay, so I thought it was too.
It's a separation of what is objectively true from any sort of compassion.
Right. And
or any sort of feeling that you might have for that this is a person, not an object.
Yes. I think that a lot of the time when you're a physician and when you're a surgeon, you're often dealing with life and death.
Yeah.
And even just the fact that you're working towards improving somebody's quality of life is something that's pretty daunting. You're cutting into flesh. You're seeing the inside of a person that you're not really naturally meant to. And that is, you have to separate the human being. You have to separate the soul from the body that you're doing that to, because otherwise it might just drive you crazy. But you can't allow that separation to override your
morals.
Basic common sense, your morals, and any critical thinking, the way that a lot of these doctors are. You can't just see your patients as numbers.
Yeah, it's a subject-object distinction, right? It's like we either see people as objects to be manipulated or used, or you see people as subjects who are made in God's image, right? And that distinction for a doctor to say, well, this is just an object, but I'm just doing my job.
Right. That's where so many doctors go wrong. And well, that conversation that I wish I could have had with them almost 10 years ago, I guess I'm kind of doing that now by filing a lawsuit against them.
You are.
Yeah.
And
Congratulations.
Speaking
Yes.
out. And we pray that that's successful for you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Wildly successful.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I hope it's
There's now
a success
precedent.
not just for me, but for every single person.
Well,
moving forward.
Mr. Air would be interested. I know, like from a business standpoint,
Yeah,
is
there's
like
now precedent.
the economics
So
of this.
and even like for me, it's just been wonderful teaching business classes. My HR class right now, we talked about this earlier, that I was able to go into once that precedent was set. We went in and did a case analysis study on it, because a lot of these healthcare plans within the corporations have gender therapy plans in there for teenagers.
Yeah.
And this has changed everything. We've been waiting for precedent, and you are far more likely to win your suit now. This is a wonderful thing. I have another question for you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to just for the sake of context for the audience,
Right.
there was the very first successful detransitioner lawsuit
Right.
in New York last month. There was a woman by the name of Fox Varian, who I think is about a year older than me, and she had a mastectomy at just 16 years old, only about a year older than I was, far too young. And she alleged physical harm from the surgery. I'm not sure what other procedures she may have been on, if she was on any of them. But she also talked about, she also alleged that there was a lack of informed consent and even possibly emotional manipulation of her and her mother, to using the same threat of potential suicide to scare her mother into doing it. And she ended up winning about $2 million, which it makes me so frustrated whenever I hear like these transgender activists or radical leftists who are like, oh, these detransitioners, there's only like a select few of them. They don't represent the majority of the transgender population. They're just grifting. They're just trying to make money. I honestly wish that my friends were actually becoming multimillionaires, because they deserve it, because this is lifelong suffering that happens as a result of this.
Right.
These are irreversible procedures, and they've had the very last bits of their childhood innocence ripped away by an ideology. They deserve so much more.
Yeah.
But it's really exciting that this case is so monumental. It's so historic, and we're going to see a lot more like it, with a lot bigger numbers and a lot more justice. And I think that we should continue praying for the success in Fox's life and in the healing of every detransitioner, and them finding a new normal after the fact.
Yeah, the lifelong process, like of surgery or hormone drugs or those sorts of things. We talked about this last night a little bit. Was part of the motivation? I don't think the whole motivation is, and I think you'd agree with this, is that once a doctor has a patient who's transgender, right? They have a patient for life.
Yep.
Right. And that's how much you mentioned a number last night. I can't remember what it was. Was it like each transgender patient reaps how much money per doctor?
So the lifetime cost of medically transitioning, including like the different drugs and the surgeries, can be anywhere from about several $100,000 to even in like the several millions, because these are pretty hefty experimental procedures, and you have to like refill prescriptions every, depending on like the basis of how often or what form they take the cross-sex hormones or the other drugs in.
Right.
And then the surgeries are individually, those are pretty massive procedures. Some of them like getting more and more into the nitty gritty of like not just like the breast removal or the implants.
You talk about plastic surgery too.
Yeah, cosmetic surgery.
Such
as like in men, they often do what they call facial feminization surgery,
Right.
meaning that they like will literally like take your skin off your face and like shave the bone under it to like remove all the contours and smooth it out to try and make somebody look like a woman, which personally I feel like it makes them look more like a like a silicone doll.
You know Lily Tino?
Yes.
Yeah.
He No offense, but he looked the exact same after he had surgery.
Right, because I saw like as I researched doing like when you were coming, it's like on the algorithm throws you stuff, and like here's this man who's had these facial surgeries. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, you don't look any different. Like I don't think you look more feminine than you. Yeah.
I mean, there's no guaranteed outcome of any of these procedures, and a lot of people will argue, well, that goes for pretty much any form of medicine. But this is like, it's literally going against reality itself and everything we know about human biology. We can only have two sexes because we only have two gametes, and our entire physiology is organized around whether we're male or female, and. The further that you go in, the more destruction it causes. And
it does.
It's all focused on cosmetics. It's all focused on very subjective metrics like happiness. What other form of medicine are we only looking at temporary feelings that eventually go away? Because whether you're a man or a woman, you're not supposed to be happy forever. That's not natural.
Yeah, we're elevating feelings over reality. It's the elevation of, I feel this way, so you have to affirm that this is my reality.
That sets a very dangerous precedent for the rest of medicine.
It does. Mr. Ayer, you were going to ask something?
Yeah. We talked about the Christians and how they approach you when you're 12. How does that compare to how you're being approached right now to your trans community now that you're speaking out?
So, I mean, I think that for a long time, unfortunately, there has been a failure of the church to really engage in the culture and to really reach out to young people in my generation and the coming generations. And I think that we are starting to see a very rapid reversal of that, which I hope continues. And that's a big part of why I speak out today. And I want to encourage everybody, no matter what their background is, no matter what life they lived, to know that they are not irredeemable, that they have an identity in Christ, and that is going to bring them very far. And they can use their testimony. They can use that same faith to bring change into the lives of other people, the same way that Christians have for me now coming out of it. But I've gotten the response that I've gotten from the transgender community for just choosing to speak the truth and to talk to my own experience has been it's been full of hatred. More than I've experienced from any, I guess, not truly believing Christian.
Does that come more from the men who are transitioning to be women or the women who are transitioning to be men? Where's more of the hatred come? Is it one or the other?
I would say that it's probably slightly more the men. And there's a bit of a difference in psychology between the sexes.
Sure,
when they in their response to people like me, like a lot of it. Honestly, it really highlights the differences between the sexes more than anything, because the men actually have a lot more masculine motivations. Like they're jealous of the fact that I am a woman. I am somebody who will never be. I am somebody who they will never be. They will never. They're mad that I went through this sort of male puberty and I still came out of it looking and going back to the life of a young woman more successfully than they ever could, no matter how many drugs or surgeries they get.
Wow.
And so they often will like get very violent, even telling me that I should like take my own life, or they'll try to like, I've had the first few times I testified ever. I was still 17-year-old.
Didn't somebody try to trip you?
Yeah, there was somebody who tripped me. There was another person who chased me down, screaming at me.
Wow.
And for the women, they're a lot less violently motivated.
Okay.
And a lot less like sexually motivated, because I also get like a lot of that kind of harassment too by this community.
Sure.
But they also tend to be a lot more catty, a lot more mean-spirited. And they're like, they're more likely to try and say things like, oh, like, you should have stayed transitioning because you're never going to look like a real woman. Like, why are you detransitioning? Obviously, it wasn't successful. Like, they'll try to go really deep into like the personal attacks and try to like get at insecurities.
Like you must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Because it didn't work.
Right. But
Wow.
I mean, I knew from the very beginning of my detransition, I knew how people would respond to it. I knew, well, if I chose to speak up about it publicly, how they would respond, because even before I was involved in politics or activism at all, I was just this 16-year-old girl who was freshly traumatized, and they saw blood in the water, and they quickly swam to it, and they tried to eat me up.
Yeah.
I was human garbage to them. I was somebody who a lot of them held a lot of hostility towards, because many of them were jealous of me for starting so young, for the fact that I actually looked like and lived the life of a young man for a little bit. And they were also mad that I had like slightly more grounded views than they did, because the transgender community kind of operates like a cult. Like any sort of like wrong speak, that is not tolerated. So there's quite a bit of arguing back and forth.
Are there people that kind of get banished from the transgender community? Like,
yeah,
still stay transgender?
Yeah, there's people
because they've said the wrong things?
Yeah, there's people like Blair White. There's a lot of like very more conservatively or even just like more libertarianly minded people who are not considered to be part of the larger trans community because they're ousted for having
Would Caitlyn Jenner
their
fall
own
into
views.
that a little bit too?
That too, yeah, him too.
Yeah, him too. Yeah.
But I knew that if I chose to speak up, the response would ramp up. But if anything, it actually compelled me to do so, because it was like, if people are going to get this mad at me just for talking about what happened, it might be worth it.
Yeah.
Like, for one, it's kind of funny.
You might be doing the right thing.
And for one, it's kind of entertaining how mad they get about me just living my life, right?
Wow.
But they also, I think it shows there's a deep insecurity in these people's lives, and that they might be the ones who need this message the most.
Absolutely.
And they've been trying so hard to suppress the voices of other detransitioners who came before me, of any like sound science, any questions by people who have been trying to raise the alarm for decades. But I saw the opportunity to use what happened to me as a kid to bring that into the culture, to bring that into the limelight, and to hopefully change the discussion on this forever and steer it towards a better direction of protection for kids, and really questioning what we are doing to our youth.
So, Chloe, they call that living rent-free in their head.
Yeah.
And we are so proud of you.
Every day.
Can I ask you, have
Thank
you ever
you.
been to a campus like HLG?
What's that?
Have you ever been to a campus like HLG?
The closest campus I can really think of would be Hillsdale.
That's a compliment.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, you guys.
It's a huge compliment.
Both campuses are incredible, and it's like
We're very
you can
like-minded
feel
with
it
them.
even just like stepping onto campus and talking to people here. It is a very conservative. It is a very respectable and faith-oriented institution, and
Yeah.
the people here have just been they've been awesome. They've been kind to me. Whereas
so glad to hear
there's
that.
there's so many historical, like even Christian and Catholic schools I've been to. Like TCU is one of them. And they made it impossible for me to have an event on their campus just to talk about this. But they had no problem with having like pro-choice or like identity politics posters and signs up all over like the lawn and all over the facilities.
It's a big difference between a school that says that they have Christian in their name and their heritage, and a school that truly lives it out. And we're trying to be a school that
I mean, they
lives
don't
it out.
even let people have baptisms on campus because they're afraid about the liability of dunking somebody into like 2 feet of water.
Wow.
That's kind of a poor excuse.
That's a poor excuse. Well, we want to kind of close down our time. I have one final question for you, and just to kind of take us to the end of our time. So describe what healing has looked like for you, both like emotionally, physically. Definitely your faith component played a huge part and a huge role in this. So what has healing looked like for you throughout this process?
A lot of people would assume that my detransition was the main driving force of my healing since then. I would say it's actually only a marginal part of it, though, because it's not like I immediately got better while I was deprogramming from the ideology of transgenderism or even from the lifestyle of the drugs itself, because I was messed up for a very long time. My senior year of high school was one of the most difficult periods of my life because nobody understood me. No, I was ousted from the trans community, from my group of friends at the time. There were a lot of like ideological disputes, and people just didn't want to be around me for some reasons understandable because I was going through a really rough period. But they didn't like that my mind was changing. They didn't like how rapidly I was changing, or the fact that I was trying to pursue a better life. There was a little bit of jealousy there too, and just kind of this crab bucket mentality of wanting to keep me in at the bottom of the bucket and suffer with them. And so I mean, my health was awful. I dropped about like 30 pounds after I went off testosterone because I just went off of it cold turkey. I had no guidance from any of my doctors who I sought help from. And I was very sickly, both physically and psychologically. I was getting myself to the wrong crowd because nobody at school wanted to be my friend. And I was just surrounded by even worse influences. But I think the biggest change in my life was making friends with people who had good values, who had good motivations, and sticking around with me, and who preached the gospel to me. And I wasn't, even when I started speaking publicly, I did not consider myself to be a Christian for a long time. I was pretty agnostic. I was open to the idea of there being a God, but I also was recovering from this idea in my head that if there was a God out there, he must have created me for wrath, for hatred, to suffer and then die. But the message that I was getting from my friends was that my story wasn't over yet, that I still had so much life to live, that I was going into my adult years with so much hope, and maybe I'd lost a lot, but I was going to gain so much more if I chose to repurpose all of it. And I think knowing that God has had a plan for me, and He knows how to use everything that I've been through, the suffering and the healing, for that purpose, has been pretty massive for me personally. The first time I spoke at a church, the pastor brought me upstairs to talk with him, and it actually was Charlie's pastor, Rob McCoy.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk, yeah.
And he didn't talk to me about politics. He didn't talk to me even about the things that happened to me. He just preached to me. And that was I didn't realize it then, but that was going to be like one of the most important moments in my burgeoning faith that would lead to me asking a lot of questions for myself, and then eventually exploring the avenue of my life and realizing this is where my missing identity was all along. Because I kept trying to chase myself. I kept idolizing these ideas of what I thought my life was supposed to look like and who I was. But I kept hitting a brick wall every time. And it was clear that the only choice I had was also the most hopeful one. It was looking towards God.
Word. That's a good word.
And building my relationship with Him, and using my experience to honor Him, and to help other people out of that same life of sin, of suffering.
Well, you are an inspiration to us, and we are so grateful to have you here just for a short window on campus. And we certainly are praying for you as you go forward, and for the Lord to increase your influence as you speak into this issue, whether it be at a church or on college campuses. And we're just grateful to know you, to see where your journey is going to go. Because you're right, the Lord is not done with you yet. He has a plan, and He's unfolding it in beautiful, beautiful ways. And so we're grateful for our Free Society podcast here at HLGU. If you want more information on Free Society at Hannibal-LaGrange University, please go to our website, www.hlg.edu, and you can find our Free Society page there. You can find our podcast on YouTube, and so please check that out as well. Again, this has been our Free Society. Thank you again, Chloe Cole, for being here.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yeah.